Welcome to episode 27 of The Pulpiteer. I'm your host, Eric Hepburn, and I'm glad to have you join us for today's episode. Today's podcast is entitled Feeling and the Body. This week is a live recording. It is inspired by Chapter 3 of our congregational read for this year, Prentis Hemphill's book, What It Takes to Heal, How Transforming Ourselves Can Change the World. If you, as a podcast listener, would like to read along, we'd love the company. Our plan is to do one chapter a month, usually on the third Sunday of each month, with the podcast coming out the following week. For those of you who don't yet know Prentis Hemphill, they are unearthing the connections between healing, community accountability, and our most inspired visions for social transformation. Prentis is a therapist, somatics teacher, and facilitator, political organizer, writer, and founder of the Embodiment Institute. They self-identify in the book as queer and black. Before we get started, I'd like to invite you to pause the podcast, pull up your favorite music streaming service or YouTube, and listen to the song Vedic Chanting 2 by Ravi Shankar from the album Chants of India. We don't have permission to include the song in the podcast, but we listen to it together in person, and it sets a certain tone for the episode. So I'll pause here a second for those of you who wish to pause and listen. All right, now we'll begin with a reading by Lionel Laguerre.
I invite you into a place of deeper stillness and reflection with this translation of the Vedic chant we just listened to. Air is established in my breath in my heart in me, myself in the immortal in the eternal. The sun is established in my eyes in my heart in me, myself in the immortal in the eternal. The moon is established in my mind in my heart in me, myself in the immortal in the eternal. The direction is established in my ears in my heart in me, myself in the immortal in the eternal. The waters are established in the seed in my heart in me, myself in the immortal in the eternal. The earth is established in my body in my heart in me, myself in the immortal in the eternal.
The earth is established in my body, the body in my heart in me, myself in the immortal in the eternal. Today we'll be taking our next steps through our congregational read, What It Takes to Heal by Prentis Hemphill. Today's theme is feeling and the body. I hope that the reading and the chanting have you a little primed, because we're not going to start with Eric talking into your brain this morning. We're going to start with the core of all somatic practice. We're going to start with a body scan. So if you feel comfortable, I invite you to close your eyes, to let your attention drift away from me. Let the sound of my voice come to you. So much time we've spent being told that we are not our body. The body has a different truth to teach us. I'm going to invite you first to give some attention to your breath. In through the nose. Hold for a moment. Out nice and evenly. As you complete your out breath, hold for a moment. The idea is to draw a square with your breath. 4 equal legs. Gentle in-breath. Hold. Gentle exhale. Hold. Feel the sensations on your throat, in your chest, as your attention stays on your breathing. When you pause that in-breath, feel the muscles in your chest around your heart. You may be carrying some tension there around your heart. It is a time of heartache. Be present with that feeling. I invite you to let your attention wander to different places in your body. I can't tell you where, but your body can. Listen to it. Somewhere in you is a muscle holding stress, a muscle clenched in an attempt to keep you safe. Give it your attention and your loving kindness. Invite it to relax, knowing that at least in this moment, in this place, you are as safe as you can be. Can you feel the life force that you are? Take your attention out to the tips of your fingers and see if you can feel that your flesh there is alive. Reach down through your torso, down your legs to your toes. Can you feel the life there, yearning to run free in the dewy grass with the sun shining? Let your attention come back up to your mind, which is likely not as quiet as you hoped it would be in this moment. Give your loving attention to your mind. Let your thoughts flow like a stream. You are not fishing for the right thought. You are sitting on a stone in the middle of your own stream of consciousness, allowing it to flow in you and through you. Return your attention to your breath. Make the square bigger. A longer inhale, a longer hold, a longer exhale, a longer hold. Do you feel more space for love and compassion finding itself in your chest? These practices of embodiment are a way to soften ourselves. Why, you might ask, do we need to become soft in a world that feels so hard? In my own vision quest work, the first lesson that was taught to me was the lesson of supplication. The brittle branch breaks in the wind, unable to yield and flow with the forces around it. Softening invites suppleness, an ability to meet a hard world as it is, and while flowing with it, to remain rooted, to remain grounded. Rigidity is not standing for your values. Rigidity is inflexibly being unable to accept things as they are, especially when those truths are uncomfortable. Supplication teaches us to confront the world as it is, not as we wish it to be. This is not disempowerment. This is empowerment. We spoke last week about two kinds of optimism. The first, the optimism of comforting but untrue stories that act like a salve on our anxiety. The kind of optimism that the Stockdale paradox warns us about. Let's let go of the lies and illusions that might feel good to believe, so that we can see the world as it is, in all of its pain and trauma and hardness. And by and through our learning to be and become soft, may we teach that to the world that needs it so. When we turn on the news, we can feel that we are being invited into reactivity, into fear, into anxiety. What is the faithful tonic for such things? Grounding, presence, de-escalation. You see, being a rigid branch is a failure to trust your own roots, to hold you while you sway. Reach down through the soles of your feet and feel that you are loved and supported by each other, by this community, by the earth itself. When you are in touch with that power, you can bend and sway and still stand firm on the side of love. love is not a hard word. It is not a rigid word. It is a word that invites softening. Softening of the eyes, softening of the heart, softening of the breath. I have more things I want to share with you from this short chapter than we have time for. So let's move in this way. If there was a section of this reading that stood out to you, that resonated with you, I would like you to raise your hand and share that with your colleagues.
Towards the first of the chapter, it talked about crying. And I took some notes. That through crying, healing can occur that can be embodied. And I never thought of that. I personally haven't cried in years and years and years. So now I'm going to think about it.
Thank you, Judy. So I put together the saddest playlist I could imagine, and I made a crying date with myself. I rented a private hot tub, and I took my playlist, and I sat in the warm water and reminded myself that I was in a place safe enough to let the feelings come. That's not me, that's a quote from the book. I do my crying at the beach. I don't like the smell of bromine. It's just a thing. Would anyone else like to share?
I must confess that I'm a crier, so I'm the opposite of Judy. I had a cry this morning. I thought, can it stop? I thought maybe it was getting over, but it's not. The loss, it keeps reoccurring and popping up. And when will it end? I don't know. Thank you.
Thank you for your vulnerability, Dave. My sister asked me when I got this job what I wanted to accomplish. One of the honest things I told her was that I would know we were doing the work we needed to do together when we really felt safe enough to cry together. So, maybe we're not there today, but we'll get there. Anyone else like to share?
I just want to read a few sentences, and how this resonated for me was what we are going to do on Wednesday night when we come together as a collective body. It's our awareness of our bodies and transform them. I think of embodiment as related, but of all the practices, right here, the rituals, here are the ceremonies that people have used across time to transform not only individual bodies, but our collective bodies as well. The ceremonies, dances, and songs that the indigenous cultures around the world has created for birthing, for death, for grief, to prepare for battle and for changing of the seasons. The rituals that give people in the community space to heal and express, where we sync with one another and feel the presence of what we shared that lies beyond words. And that's what I see we do here today and through other practices.
Thank you, Michelle. That's beautiful. Anyone else? I was going to save this for announcements, but if you look around, since Michelle broached it, we are going to get together on Wednesday night. We're going to have a vigil. We're going to follow the vigil with the drum circle. But around you, you will see the 5 gates of grief on the wall. I invite you before you leave today to walk past each one and sit with it for a moment in preparation for our vigil on Wednesday night. The first gate of grief: everything we love, we will lose. Everything that we love, we will lose. The second, the places that have not known love. Most of us in our walking of this path of life have had some places within us that we were encouraged to neglect. Some parts of us that were too much. Maybe they reminded our parents of the parts of themselves that they didn't love in themselves. The third gate of grief, very salient in this moment, the sorrows of the world. Genocide, ecological disaster. It's out there and it's real, and even when we think we're ignoring it, we're still feeling it. We're not as separate from the rest of life as our culture would have us believe. The fourth gate of grief. This is a big one this last couple weeks. What we expected and did not receive. The words wise leadership are just flashing in my brain like a giant neon sign. What I expected and did not receive. And the final one, ancestral grief. We just can't get past the fact that colonialism, patriarchy, racism, these are long-standing patterns of dehumanization that we all carry around with us. There is no attempt to dehumanize another that does not dehumanize the one attempting to do it. Violence harms both the victim and the perpetrator, but not in the same way. But both of those wounds have to be healed to bring us back into right relationship with one another. Let's talk about numbing for just a minute. There are some very culturally endorsed ways of numbing in our world. Alcohol, drugs, social media, sex, escapes that we use so we don't have to feel what's going on. Y'all have heard me say before that shame is not a social justice tool, and it isn't. Because shame is believing I am bad, not I have done a bad thing. So we hear shame and guilt paired a lot. Shame/guilt, as if they were the same thing. It is a tremendously important distinction. Shame is the belief that because of something you did that you are a bad person. Guilt is the belief that you did a bad thing. It leaves the door open on learning and growing and healing. And we need that door. So, numbing is not shameful. There are moments when it is the right thing to do, when the feelings you're having are too overwhelming for you to metabolize in that moment. And there is no shame in that. But when numbing becomes a habit, we call it an addiction. And then it does become a deep problem for us. So I just invite you to be mindful about that in this time. One of my favorite lines from this chapter, which makes me think of the first line of our regular benediction, make your question a quest. So we say every week, questions more powerful than answers. Make your question a quest. I thought of a parallel from something else that we've been talking about, which is to make your trigger a trail. We've talked about this, right? That your trigger, that thing that triggers you into reactivity, is an invitation for you to learn something deeper about yourself. A lesson your body can teach you. To feel an emotion is to allow it and let it run through. To learn from what it is telling you, about your relationships. Dave brought this up for me. Once upon a time, not too long ago, my grandmother died. And I thought, along the same vein that Dave expressed, that, well, if I just make some time, I'll just go get this out of my system. So I went out to West Texas by myself, sat around a fire all night, and the grief didn't come. And I thought, man, I set aside time for this and everything. Where are my feelings? Did I forget to pack them in my bag when I packed the car this morning? This goes back to that supplication thing I was talking about. Your body is not here at the convenience of this thing up here. They are one thing, although we have been taught otherwise. You have to be ready for the winds of your feelings when they blow. You don't get to pick the time. Now, as Prentis teaches us, you can send an invitation. You can put together a playlist of your saddest songs and invite yourself to sit with those feelings. But you can only welcome them. You can't force them. I'm going to end on this note today. We can't think our way out of this moment that we're in. We struggle with questions like, what do we do with toxic people in our lives? We struggle with the question of, what do we do when the feelings of despair and loneliness and sadness overwhelm us? We must become supple to weather such storms. That means spending some time deepening our roots and softening our body. Deepening our roots and softening our body. Until next time, thank you for joining us on The Pulpiteer. The Pulpiteer podcast is a production of the San Gabriel Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Georgetown, Texas. If you'd like to support the podcast, you can make a donation at sangabrieluu.org/give. The podcast is hosted by Spotify, and theme music is by John Faber. Our live tech recording crew is Frank Sanders, Rob Berthold, Keith Hutchinson, and Andrea McDaniel. Special thanks this week goes out to Prentis Hemphill, Ravi Shankar, and Francis Weller for his work on the 5 Gates of Grief. The podcast is produced and performed by Eric Hepburn. We are off next week, but we'll see you back here in December.